What's good, Newbark? Today we're going to be talking about some Tower of God Episode 1. Let me start off by saying I think this episode found a great balance between introducing a lot of information without revealing so much that I really feel like I know what's going on at all. Generally speaking, I feel like the whole world of the show has an air of mystery about it after the pilot that just makes me want to watch it even more. So, keeping that in mind, let's dive on in. In this episode, we are introduced to our main character, Bam, a boy trying to climb a tower that has the power to grant the one who conquers it whatever it is they desire. Bam doesn't care about this though, and is climbing the tower in pursuit of his friend Rachel, who began her climb in hopes that she could see the stars and, as she says, escape the dark world that they are living in. In the episode, we aren't given a ton of details as to the relationship between Bam and Rachel, and what exactly the whole dynamic there is outside of the opening sequence where Bam is trying to prevent Rachel from leaving for the tower in the first place, and a brief flashback. During the flashback segment, it's revealed that Rachel actually rescued Bam from some sort of a cavern he was trapped in, and that seeing the stars has long been a dream of hers. We also find out Bam has lost his memory, which, given my experience with previous storylines where the main protagonist suffers from memory loss, such as Yu-Gi-Oh!, this typically ends up being a major plot point later on. Since Rachel seems to have saved Bam from death, either by starvation or other means, it's easy to understand why he cares so much about her. And based on the scene where he tackles her to the ground as she is trying to leave for the tower, and both of them are staring at each other blushing, it would appear the feeling is at least somewhat mutual. Since there is blushing involved, part of me also can't help but wonder if maybe there is some hint of romance between the two, especially since Bam is literally risking his life for a chance to see Rachel again. But once more, just because that is a typical trope in plotlines across many genres doesn't necessarily mean it applies here. There is, after all, no reason why a friend can't risk their life to save another friend, especially when the first friend had their life saved by the second friend previously. Next, let's discuss the tower itself and the world we're dealing with here, which also leaves a lot up in the air to question. We know that whomever conquers the tower is supposed to have their desires fulfilled. Based on the two tower tests we see in this episode being an encounter with a kaiju-sized eel and what is essentially a real-life battle royale, we can also assume that the tower presents an extreme level of danger to anyone who chooses to climb it. Beyond that, the tower's overseer, Heidan, we also know has ties to a royal family, as he states he is responsible for helping to maintain their prosperity. We also know that Yuri, princess of said royal family, has been specifically forbidden from entering the tower testing grounds, as stated by her navigator, Evan. Both of these would imply to me that the ruling class of this family has some ties to the tower, and could quite well even be in charge of it entirely. It is also repeatedly stated that the tests are meant to determine who is worthy of climbing the tower. There also seems to be a rather strict classification system used for those attempting to climb it, being the quote-unquote regulars and the quote-unquote irregulars. Yuri defines the irregulars as being those that enter the tower by opening the gates on their own. Since irregulars are defined as people who enter the tower on their own and regular means the opposite of irregular, I would then assume that regulars are those selected, possibly even against their will, to participate in the tower's challenge. As a final note on the tower, and the one I personally find the most intriguing, we also know that Yuri would supposedly be executed if her father found out that she was interfering with the testing process, such as, I don't know, when she's helping Bam during his first trial. Before the end of the episode, when Yuri tells Evan that they are pursuing Bam since her life would be meaningless without interesting things, and of course she also needs to get the Black March back from him, Evan then asks if she really believes an irregular would be the one to change the tower. To me, this sounds like Yuri is out to change something about how the tower is operated, as Evan asking her this implies that she's looking for someone who indeed can change the tower. Perhaps it is her father that runs the tower, and he is aware that Yuri disagrees with what we can assume are rather immoral practices based on the couple of tests we've seen in the tower so far. So that is why he forbids her from being there. He's worried that she's going to shift something about this crucial element of his regime. When we start to couple in the fact that Evan states that, quote-unquote, the tower's superstition is true, after the Black March responds to Bam's call for help, perhaps we are starting to see some pieces of a larger plot at play piece themselves together. Recall the Black March is a blade that is only supposed to respond to princesses of Yuri's royal family, yet it answers the call from Bam for help and has never once responded to Yuri when she has asked for help. Perhaps the superstition that Evan speaks of is some kind of a prophecy that tells of someone who can stop the tower as a whole or at least change it, and that is the reason Yuri continues to aid and follow after Bam. Perhaps she does believe Bam, an irregular, is the one who can fulfill said prophecy. Could also give some reason as to why Yuri seems so interested in Bam in the first place, other than her side comment about him being cute, as outside of the blade responding to Bam and his overall tenacity, he seems to lack any kind of special traits. This is something I enjoy about him as a character since it makes him more relatable and adds to how much courage he has since he is risking his life against countless skilled and mystical creatures for his friend, but since he is so normal, what would make Yuri so interested in him in the first place? Once more, perhaps he presents a solution to a problem of hers, such as changing the tower. While on the subject of Yuri, let's talk about her character a bit, as her and the blue-haired boy that we'll talk about soon are by far the ones I find most interesting so far, since I don't have a great sense of their deeper motivation just yet. Sounds like Yuri may be fundamentally against the tower as she aids Bam with advice and weapons to try and prevent him from getting killed, pushes Heidan out of the way to go help when she believes Bam has been eaten by the eel, and seems like she may be looking for someone who can change the tower itself. But we don't know why. All we really know about Yuri for sure so far is that she seems to be a competent warrior based on the invisible arsenal of weapons she carries around and the way she acrobatically kicks Bam when she first meets him. She is royalty, and that she is both strong and independent. Based on her interactions with Bam in this episode, I think she may end up serving as a sort of mentor to him as the show progresses, since she will be following him and so far has shown no malevolent intent towards him. I mentioned before that we would talk some about the blue-haired boy that appears during the second test in the last chunk of this episode. In his case, I think we may be looking at another potential ally for Bam, for a number of reasons. For starters, in the beginning of the episode, we are posed a question by the narrator of, "What do you desire?" followed by a series of possible answers. After the response of honor and pride, we are then showed the blue-haired boy with his briefcase, which could of course be a misdirection by the writers, but if it isn't, we would then be probably safe to assume that even if the blue-haired boy turns out to be a rival or antagonist of some kind, he is likely at least one that has a code of conduct or ethics he operates by to maintain his honor and pride. In other words, I don't think he is likely one to try and win in the tests by any means necessary, and at the very least is a respectable opponent. Second, he has two encounters during the Battle Royale style test where he opts to talk with his opponents and only seems to engage in combat when they are the ones to initiate it. In the first instance, he faces an assailant much larger than himself who swings their weapon that he promptly blocks with his briefcase. The blue-haired boy then asks why his attacker is trying to kill him, with a reply of "whoever survives wins." The blue-haired boy then tells his attacker that he easily stoops to being controlled. To me, this sounds like he looks down on someone who is willing to take action simply because it is what they are told to do. And if the blue-haired boy indeed has honor, perhaps he is also criticizing his opponent being willing to do something like murder that would violate the morals of many simply because those are the implied rules of the test. We then see the corpse of the blue boy's opponent a few minutes later, who killed him, but that would have been an act of self-defense, hence potentially defending his code of honor if he indeed has one. The next encounter the blue boy faces is with Bam. Bam is focused on a much larger opponent than himself with Black March poised, before the blue boy basically tells him he lacks the conviction for murder and then asks why he isn't focused on the attacker behind him. The blue boy could have easily killed Bam here if that was his intent, as Bam didn't notice him before he spoke. In the first encounter, based on the end result, it looks like the blue boy also could have easily killed his opponent without any discussion, but once more, he didn't. The blue boy could also be walking around with his weapon poised for combat to kill as many opponents as possible in hopes of having a better chance to survive, but again, he doesn't. All this tells me that he probably prefers to avoid killing, especially after he judges one of his opponents for choosing to participate in killing so willingly. Once more, perhaps he has some kind of a code of honor that goes against killing unless it is absolutely necessary. Additionally, he does aid Bam by informing him of the opponent behind him, and honorable fighters typically prefer testing combat skills more directly, with both fighters preparing on even footing as opposed to one surprise attacking the other. So it's possible the blue boy is simply arrogant and sees no need to carry his weapon around since he feels he could best everyone in combat even without it drawn, and asks all these questions of others since he feels he is in no real danger so he can explore his curiosity, or maybe he has a good side to him and may even find himself helping Bam. Since he is shown in the intro to the episode and Bam is the main character, I would say it is safe to assume both of them also survive this encounter at the end. Given how both of them are involved in the stalemate where the episode stops, perhaps the reason Bam even survives that scuffle is because of the blue boy, especially considering Black March said she would help him only once, which he already used up during his encounter with the eel. Of course, it's also possible that Yuri is caught up with him at that point and could be his savior from the scuffle as well, depending on how she really views him. When it comes to the idea of allies, I think it's also important we remember that Bam himself states that it isn't climbing the tower that he is interested in. So even if we assume only one person can succeed in reaching the top to have their wish granted, Bam doesn't care about the wish itself. He cares about seeing Rachel again. Since the nature of his reason for climbing the tower is different from what we can assume to be most people's, and it isn't explicitly the reward that the tower can provide which Bam seeks, I think this also means he has a much better shot at being able to form alliances than other competitors, as his ally could reap the real reward as long as he is able to see Rachel again and everyone will come away happy. Speaking of Bam's motivation of seeing Rachel, Black March also warns him that even if he does succeed, things will likely not be as they were between he and Rachel, as she has been without him for quite some time. This adds to what I was thinking before in terms of time possibly acting differently within the tower, as it would seem even if more time has passed within the show than real life, that at most Rachel would have disappeared from Bam for a day or two, which certainly doesn't sound like a long time. If the tower, on the other hand, runs off a sort of distorted time system, though, this seemingly small time from the perspective of Bam could have been years or longer for Rachel. Also, in terms of Black March, it has a distinct symbol near the hilt of the blade, that is also seen on the blade wielded by a green lizard girl in the second test during the episode. Bam's attacker towards the end identifies both Black March and this blade as being formidable. Perhaps since Black March came from royalty, being Yuri, maybe this green lizard girl is also royalty? Should also note that when it comes to her, during the intro sequence where the narrator asks what motivates you, the green lizard girl is shown after the narrator answers with revenge or. So similar to the blue boy, if we aren't being misled here, perhaps the green lizard girl is on a trail of revenge and maybe it's even against Yuri's family in some way if we are to assume Yuri's family runs the tower. If the green lizard girl has that blade because she is royalty of some kind, maybe she is seeking revenge after a feud between her and Yuri's families, or maybe her family was lost to the tower or something along those lines. After all, conflicts between different royal families is, well, relatively typical both inside fiction and in real life historically speaking. I'm certainly curious to find out how this ends up going. All in all, between having a relatable, brave, and endearing main character and an interesting supporting cast with more questions than answers right now, and all of them being seated within a world that is highly mysterious, this anime has caught my attention for the time being, if nothing else. With all that being said, that's going to wrap up my thoughts on this episode, guys, so be sure to let me know all of your thoughts, comments, theories, etc. in the comments section down below. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like and subscribe, and if not, I'm always looking for suggestions on how I can improve things. Otherwise, thank you all for watching, and I'll catch you guys in the next video.